Peace, peace. What's good? WUKUSU. I'm gonna hit you with the WUKUSU. Wake up, clean up, stand up. As our dear brother Omuwalamu, uh, more commonly known as Brother Malcolm X would say, wake up, clean up, and stand up. Here at the Maroon Society, we've taken that and we use that as a greeting. WUKUSU. That's how the Maroons are greeting one another. The modern Maroons. WUKUSU. Wake up, clean up, stand up. Black man, black woman, what's going on? It's your brother Yanga. Glad to be coming to you today. Uh, man, it's a beautiful day. Praise God, the universe, however you dress that mighty force. And after that, giving thanks to the ancestors. What I'm excited about today and today's little talk, man, is more, it's going to be an introduction. I'm excited about today because not only am I going to introduce you to Maroonage, to the Maroon Society, but also it's the launch of my little platform. If you dare say it's the launch of my little platform, you know what I'm saying? Why the Maroon Society? Well, it's a society that I actually belong to. It is a society that exists. And one of the things is just that we've taken on maroonage as a thought, as a way of life. And I said, you know what? Social media would be a cool place to introduce this concept to give us a forum for free black think. That means it can get as radical as far out there as you can take it, and that it's open for uh, challenges, questioning, and all that. Anything that has to do with my self determination, and I would advise you to adopt this philosophy also that has to do with your self determination, your freedom, your way that you choose your life. Be very, very thorough in what you adopt. I think I hear that being a recurring theme. Be careful what we adopt or what we have adapted. You know, um, man, shouts out to everybody out there too, man. Let me say shouts out to SVDL, Solar Vision Debate League, coming back, looking for bigger, better, dynamic, like we always do. Minor setback for major comebacks. You understand what I'm trying to tell you? Minor setback for major comebacks, pimping. That's all it is, man. So, looking for SVDL to come back and do their thing. Excited to be a part of that. Shouts out to Alex Vortex for gracing the show with his presence, man. Shouts out to Dark Side. Power to the Dark Side, Double Master, the teacher, the blackologist, and Yame, the high priestess, Akasha, my man King Kofi, all the Dark Side, and just in the chat, Nika the Star Seed, everybody, man, that just makes that thing a functioning machine. Shouts out to y'all, man. All powers to the people. Never forget the power resides in your participation, your willingness and wanting to push a concept forward. Speaking of concept, let's go back to the Maroon Society. So the Maroon Society, I think, and I'm gonna play a couple films. It goes into Maroon and Maroonage, and the Maroonage way of life and the Maroonage thought. But why I said that we have to go back to this because in my introduction to social media, I've been on some very interesting platforms. I've listened in on some very interesting platforms, and I see uh, everybody has their own style of doing things, and but what the recurring theme is really black excellence, black brilliance, even if you call the beef sector. You know what I'm saying? Cracking, playing the dozens, whatever, clowning, and going at it has always been a part of what we do. Now, do I endorse everything of how we going in? No, I'm not really abreast of that sector to be trying to make some type of enlightened comment or commentary. You know what I'm saying? But I'm just saying this that um, I see that if not even the content, even if you don't like the content, I have to applaud the business savvy and professionalism it goes into not just creating these channels, these mechanisms, but also maintaining them and making them advantageous for them. Shit, they eating to eat if you can eat straight up and down like 6 o'clock and do what you love doing and bring some enlightenment, entertainment, or just some hot motherfucking truths to the peoples. Man, salute, salute, Maroon Society type shit for you. Uh, Definitely in Maroon Society. One of the things we're giving to what's going on, introvert? What's good? Peace. What's good? Peace, people. Peace, peace. So that's what I wanted to provide here, man. That free space, that space for black thought, the home of black thought. Like I said, it might take a little licking, but I'm sure that it'll keep on ticking. You yourself coming in when you take sanctuary and safe haven with the Maroons. The Maroons didn't offer harm. We just look for your contribution and participation for our cause. But you know what? Let's let this speak for itself, man. Let me play a few films on exactly what a Maroon is and why I chose uh the Maroon Society. Let me see if I got it set up. Let's get this together. And we'll play a little bit of exactly what a Maroon is. You know, some takes and breakdowns. Let's get this going. Uh oh. Hold on, give me a minute. Give me a minute. Let's talk about these Maroons for a minute. See if we can see this get us up and cracking. Let me throw this. Y'all bear with me, man. Your boy's learning. Let's get this up and then we'll go here.
The Cardi B.
An Offset meal.
Yeah, I'm your host, Clarity. Now, there was so.
All right, let's see if we get this thing going. Connection trying not to act right.
So much misinformation out there about Black history, especially when it comes to slavery in general.
Man, it's acting like it don't want to do it for me. Let me see.
Crow. Now, leave it to Hollywood, and they'll make you think that Harriet Tubman was the only one who ever got free, and that Nat Turner is the only one who ever fought back. Nothing could be farther from the truth. See, the fact is, Africans constantly rebelled against their enslavement for the entire time slavery existed. Many of those rebellious Africans escaped to freedom in other countries, but some remained right here in the United States and started their own free Black towns. In America, they will call them fugitives, runaways. Around the world, these self-liberated Africans were known as the Maroons. Now, who exactly are the Maroons? How were they able to free themselves from captivity? And what can African Americans learn today from our Maroon ancestors in North America and around the world? We'll answer these questions and many, many more right now on The Breakdown.
The Breakdown.
There is a disconnect in America when it comes to Black history. It is a disconnect between the reality of this history and the distorted impression many young people have today. In recent years, memes and t-shirts have appeared saying, "I'm not my ancestors, I'll put my hands on you," or "I'm not my ancestors, I don't turn the other cheek," all in response to a common misnomer about the ways in which oppressed Black people in America responded to their condition in the past. Because of the often limited ways in which the history of slavery and civil rights is taught in Western school systems, many young people have come away with the impression that African American ancestors were docile victims, too afraid to stand up for themselves and fight for their rights.
Bam, that's the first thing I like to address. Now, mind you, this is BET. It is going to be commercial, but it has the overlay. I encourage, like I told you again, I encourage every person to dig for themselves, to research for themselves, if they want to go further into the understanding. But generally, I thought this was a good outline. Excuse me. And it starts off on a very strong place. It begins to address what they call the misnomer. It begins to address the lie, the outright lie that we were uh there was no fight back in us. This is why I fight hard against docility. This is why I fight hard against just passiveness. It really it I mean, it really has to be explained to me in a certain way. I think that I really feel like that not only is that a stereotype that has been placed on us, that we were passive, that we would just willingly embrace our conditions, but that it is a philosophy. If we're not careful, it is a philosophy that will be pushed on us in cloaked and covered in the gravy of divinity, of sanctimoniousness, of holiness. You know what I'm saying? I mean, my whole thing is, if we redefine ourselves, then I think we have the liberty to reify our God. Shouts out to Dark Side. I'm gonna tell you why. I like what Dark Side is doing with the whole stimia thing. You know what I'm saying? If it's in Because one of the things is they're attaching it to themselves, to the advancement of themselves. They're putting themselves in divinity's space by attaching to the creation and contribution to civilization for black people. My stimuli would be what? Social, um, tangible, science, technology, engineering, social, tangible shit. I don't know, and it definitely be and military, that motherfucker, engineering and military. But it would be, my God would relate to our very real condition. So I said that I don't want to digress to get off to them destroying that myth that we just laid down willingly or went through this shit uh willingly. You see, peace. Okay. Thank you. Peace, everyone. I'm glad y'all had an opportunity to fall through. So just going to recap, man, we're just doing what a maroon is.
Right to live. They believe that except for the occasional demonstration or revolt, all their ancestors mostly did was keep their heads low, cried, sung, and prayed for freedom. But even a brief examination of the full history of slavery and Jim Crow in the US will prove that the opposite is true. Africans sustained a relentless and formidable fight against slavery from the very beginning and continued to do so for hundreds of years. In many cases, enslaved Africans in North America successfully liberated themselves by the dozens and even by the hundreds through armed resistance and escape. They went north to Canada, south to Mexico, and overseas to the Caribbean. Others escaped and remained right here in the United States, joining forces with Native American tribes or starting their own free Black towns, which they defended for generations. We call these self-liberated Africans the Maroons.
There was resistance from minute one. In fact, resistance in terms of being forced to get on the slave ships in the first place. As early as the 1520s, the Spanish had brought enslaved Africans to the territory north of today's Florida. The Maroons were self-liberated Africans who were able to escape from the jurisdiction of the Spanish and set up their own communities, or in some cases, the Africans defected to the indigenous side, chased the Spanish back to the Caribbean.
The presence of Maroons was not limited to the United States and can be found all over the Western Hemisphere. Just about anywhere in history enslaved Africans are found, you'll also find Africans who fought back against their enslavers and won.
Perhaps the most profound episode in the history of African people, including African people in North America, is the Haitian Revolution, 1791 to 1804, when the enslaved rose up as one, and one of the most important revolts in the history of the world. And that is a story that we all need to study and learn.
See, this is the side of history, and like I said, this is amazing because this is commercial. This is, surface. I can appreciate them putting this out because this is a side of the history about your Egungun, your ancestors that you need to know. Not only were you a resilient people or a people that could persevere and go through, you were a people that fought back against oppression and injustice everywhere you found it. And in that fight, we have gained our liberation. There have been, so he's talking now, this is just like I said, general oval. He's talking historical, he's talking about some geographical places that I encourage. There are documents on documents of geographical places right here in America where Maroon, and we'll go into what Maroon means. You know what I'm saying? The understanding of Maroon. You know what I'm saying? But where Maroon communities have been set up, and you're going to see why I call this the Maroon Society, home of free black thought, because when you begin to understand that the Maroon addressed a lot of the problems we faced over here with identity, ethnicity, tribalism, culturalism, by the mixed mingle, by colonization, by the conquistadors, just by everything that was going on in Americas, and how us people of color were either forced to mix or mixed through trade or just general agreement of our own fruition. Still, we understand black to be a social, not just a cultural, but a social, political, economic one. You will find how these Maroons, how these communities broke off to address these questions within themselves without understanding that aid and intervention from other people was detrimental to them, and they fought against it. If you try to come get them, hence my name Yanga, from Jasper Yanga. You know what I'm saying? It's, I've been a Maroon from day one. It's just now I see everything out there, the time for it, and for Maroons to begin to teach a little bit what Maroon is and Maroonage is, and just introduce it to the people. So this is what I wanted to just talk about that briefly. We're talking about the importance of knowing this in history and how this isn't taught in our history.
Now, with regard to other examples, I would point to Palmares in Brazil. It's probably one of the most successful so-called Maroon settlements in the history of the Americas. They escaped the jurisdiction of the slave owners, set up their own community, which lasts for about 100 years.
In fact, Africans successfully fought back against enslavement so often that the European investors in the slave trade started taking out insurance policies to protect their financial stake in the case of a rebellion or the loss of a slave ship, as it was not uncommon for Africans to overpower the European slave traders and give
Insurance
them
company
a taste
owe
of
us.
their own medicine.
There were instances of the enslaved, or the potentially enslaved, I should say, taking over the ships and sailing the ships back to Africa with the would-be enslavers becoming captives. So I'm not sure where this mythology about not rebelling came from.
Although many Africans were successful fighting back and evading capture, it goes without saying that many more were unable to avoid the brutal voyage through the Middle Passage. But the human spirit and desire for freedom is strong. And
we had to start with just one specific thing: allow a woman of color to tell her
And even after arriving on the shores of North America, the African fighting spirit remained and endured. So much so that Africans continued to resist and rebel, some finding allies among local indigenous Americans, while others sought refuge in terrain too hostile for slave catchers to risk the pursuit.
Well, Florida is probably site number one, not least because of solidarity from the indigenous populations. In fact, there was a de facto merger. And then, of course, there's the Dismal Swamp area, when Nat Turner, the great slave rebel of the 1830s, rose up with his comrades in one of the bloodiest revolts of the enslaved in history of the United States. They were trying, apparently, to seek sanctuary in the Dismal Swamp area. The terrain is difficult to navigate. Think of Florida, where you still have a substantial population of alligators. So this all helps to guarantee that these areas would be sanctuaries for fleeing Africans.
If the rough terrain
I heard that. Y'all heard that? How they go in them swamps, let them alligators protect them. The first pit bulls. Here you talk about. No, just, what's up, man? Shouts out. I put the link on in there. Come up here and build. I'm just playing these things, man. Let's do the build. And talking about this Maroon Society. Just wanted to set up a, like I said, this is what I'm launching my platform on. This is what it's going to be about. You know, and it's tons of history on us, on our quest for liberation and our actual victories. We don't get enough of the victories. I'm gonna go into Maroonage. I'm gonna go into the whole philosophy of it in the after this one. But listen, I'm out here, man. It's a summer day in Atlanta, boy. They got them beeping. Okay. You gotta love our people. Pops. What? I wouldn't want to be anything but us. You hear me? Oh, you gotta love our people. The sisters got them beeping. It's a wonderful day in the A. Man. All right, man. We back to Maroonage, man. So, shouts out again to everybody in the chat. So this is what it's about. The Maroons, man. Those people that broke off, that wasn't with it, went kicked ass. I'm giving a overview. I'm gonna let them keep giving a nice, beautiful presentation. I think they're doing a wonderful job. Fantastic. But it was about us kicking ass from the jump. And even though they may have shanghaied us, bushwhacked us, overpowered us at certain instances and moments, and individually and collectively in times in history, what they stamp out, which is the privilege of the conqueror. That's what they'll do. They will revisit history. It's called revisionism. They're going to rewrite that bitch and make them look heroic. They have done no wrong, divinely guided and blessed. If they write the history, that's what they call winner's prerogative. But the truth of the matter, now that it's coming out with the ability, and we thank the universe, you know what I'm saying? Look, bro, I keep y'all dark side a shout out, even to the ability to read and dig this history up that begins to let us find a victorious history, a history of us winning, so that you out there that possess a militant spirit, that possess that Ogun, that Shango, that jihadist, that crusadist for your cause. I'm just doing shots out at my brother Lex. For your cause, for for the cause of black liberation. Man, you're not alone in that. That is not foreign. That is not anything that you have to sequester. That is not anything that you should squash. That is a very real energy. It's coming from your egungu, from your egun, from your ancestors. Here we're showing you. Some of us should do our research into our ancestry. Hell with all that ancestry.com, and we finding out I was part Welsh. I was part Scottish. Man, find out who Big Mama was related to, boy. Find out who your folks is down south. Find out the vainglorious history that your people probably participated in to bring your little black ass into existence. The ancestors are very real. And there's no denying the Egun, no denying the ancestors. Why? Because there's no denying your very presence. If you're about your salt, if you're about anything, there should be no denying you. You should exist and people should feel you. Let's go back to these Maroons because this was the spirit that they possessed. Let me get Double Master Teacher up here.
Yo,
Yo, what's good, brother?
what's good? What's good?
Man, what's
Yeah,
good, man?
what's crazy about it? I just wanted to say this because you jumped in on the Maroons, right? And
Right.
I don't know if you remember a while back. I went into when I was going at when I was coming at the Haiti ordeal, and I was saying that Palenque was the first free state in the Americas, right?
Yeah. You should. You know what?
And that's the king of Guinea-Bissau. Uh huh. Go
You
ahead.
should what? Yeah. No, I was just saying. Yeah. You should. Now that you say that, I do remember that.
Oh, you
Yeah.
said I showed. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So
You.
yeah, and it was that Palenque was the first one in Colombia, right?
Hmm.
And what's crazy is that's what they called it was a Maroon state. That's what they were saying. Anybody who can make it to Palenque was free. You know what I'm
Hmm.
saying? And but that's what they called themselves, the Maroons. You know
Yes,
what I
sir.
mean? And it was a state for the Maroons and other Maroons. So that's crazy. I never mentioned that part because it'd be enough shit. You know what I'm saying? But I do want you to kind of, that like I never mentioned that part, bro. I didn't brought it up in debates and everything. I kind of skip over the Maroon part because I don't be want to add no extra fucking confusion to niggas and none
Man,
of that.
brother, it's your.
You
It's
know
all.
how niggas is,
It's I already know
man.
what it. Listen, hit blue double master. I'm telling you, I thought about. I thought it was the ancestors that came to me and gave it. I was like, man, I already know. When I ran about somebody this morning, they kind of was like, ah. I was like, but the maroons, man.
Yeah,
But it's your egg room, blue. So you know, anytime you welcome over here, dogs, I always welcome to teach. You know what I'm saying? We're pushing this maroon concept. I'm gonna
right,
go into the whole concept of maroonage, and I think pushing that will really help. Will really be a big part of the missing link that we've been really missing between the whole Pan Africanism, Black nationalism, West
right.
Broad type of thing. Really pushing the maroon and the maroon spirit and what it's about. And maroonage is an
Nah, it
idea.
definitely is.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, because you can see that, especially in the islands. A lot of the Africans in the islands identified as Maroons when they got free. So
absolutely.
it's something to that.
It's the that's the universal. That's our universal connection for the that's I don't know what you call universal revolutionary, universal rebel, free man, African outside of Africa.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? African outside of Africa.
Revolutionary identity.
Yeah, exactly. We
Right.
we're gonna fight against this shit. We'll never accept this shit, and we run off and we establish our own shit. But it's gonna go a little bit into that. Let's get back to a little bit
Right.
to this film.
You know, no.
Of the southeastern swamplands were sanctuaries for fleeing Africans. It could be equally said that the Negro Fort in northern Florida was a sanctuary for fighting Africans.
About the Negro Fort, which is probably the most significant armed encampment of Africans in history.
Do this. Do this. Damn. I am in a bad spot.
They had cannons, they had rifles, they had swords. They make the Black Panther Party and the Black Liberation Army of the late 20th century
Okay.
seem mild and tame by comparison.
Although perhaps mild and tame by comparison
Well,
in terms of weaponry, Black American freedom movements have embodied the fighting spirit of the Maroons for centuries. From Marcus Garvey's UNIA to the African Blood Brotherhood in Tulsa to the Deacons for Defense, the Black Panther Party, and even the Nation of Islam. The spirit of self-defense and self-sufficiency have endured within Black America for generations. Even today, many African
is this happening? Okay. A reason. Let me see if I'm. Blue, can you still hear me? Blue. What I'm gonna have to do? Can you? Can you hear me? Let me see if I'm a good. Can you guys hear me? I'm assuming you can hear me. What I'm gonna have to do is try to hook that up through another connection, because it doesn't seem like, another platform. Y'all have to bear with me while I do this ripping and running. But like Blue is absolutely right when we talk about the controversy that probably could arise from bringing up the very concept of the Maroons, but very necessary because these were sanctuaries, these were safe havens. Like he said, that it was called a Maroon city, a Maroon community. If you could make it there, you had a ride to safety. You were welcome. You had a ride to complete freedom and liberation. You know what I'm saying? So that was a spot that you knew you could go participate in its development and quite possibly prosper. And all it asked for was your participation in loyalty, allegiance, and in its defense.
It was crazy. They freed so many slaves. They was beating the brakes off of the Spaniards to the point where it doesn't initially. I think 1598 is officially when they recognize, but they have been freeing people since like 1504. So
Yeah.
like you know what I'm saying. So like from 1504, they was just knocking the Spaniards off. You know what I mean? Damn near 100 years, knocking their
Mhm.
ass off and building an army and shit with with the enslaved people that they would, you know what I mean, that they was able to free. So
Yeah.
that shit, bro. Palenque was one of the best ones because they still, it's getting tough now because of the Catholicism that kind of crept in. But that's one of the few places where they still hold on to the language. You know what I'm saying? That they originally spoke when they got there. So that, like, niggas be trying to talk that stupid shit, but we know, like, the king was a king from Guinea-Bissau, and from the day he got off the ship, that motherfucker was able to take control and then start freeing people. Created a whole free state and shit.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
and a lot of them was dope. Is they was using like uh you know what I'm saying, our spiritual systems and shit. Like they was using, like, you know what I mean, basically well, I would say the closest probably, I mean, it would be like E5.
Mm-hmm.
And they was using it, you know what I mean, to fight. They was able to, like do all, and see, this is really why when you get here to the States, they lock down on that shit. That
Yeah.
being able to talk to each other in our language and shit, being able to practice what we was practicing, like no, they cut that out. Like that's dead. And
Mm-hmm.
that's why they
They
was
make sure of
like
that.
they got smart here. You know what I'm saying? Like by the time it gets, because people be looking at it like it all happens in one wop, but really by the time it get to the English and they little and you know they little leftovers, these people are, you know what I mean? They've already seen all of the uprisings and the shit that happened in the islands and in South America. They're
Mm-hmm.
not finna do that.
Mm-hmm.
Like
They
we're
already
not
know.
going down that route again. Yeah. So
Yeah.
down here, they split us apart, and you getting beat for speaking your language and all that practicing that shit. Nah, they create a whole doctrine. Nah, that shit is witchcraft. Like straight up, they cut that shit off quick. That shit witchcraft. To the
Right.
point
Yeah.
you pop up with that today, your grandma's still looking at it like,
Mm-hmm.
hell
Mm-hmm.
no. Even though she do it in church without even knowing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like she don't even remember. That's how far removed we is because they be doing this shit in church.
Yeah. I can't tell
Like
you
the black church ain't no fucking regular church.
absolutely. I can't tell you how many times I go to people's homes. Hold on, my bad. Let me trying to still set it up.
That might be me. You get feedback. Oh, my fault. That's dead. So yeah, even when you know like that connection is there even in the church. I, I don't know, you know, a lot. I hear people who always give the normal cliche stories about the black church and the collection plate, all of that bullshit. Yeah, but I've been fortunate enough to have been a part of some real, like my mama didn't step foot in a church unless she knew the spirit was there. If
Mm-hmm.
that shit wasn't there, we left
Mm-hmm.
immediately.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
she had to. It wasn't no going there into no church and ain't no drums in there. My mom
Mm-hmm.
be like, ain't no fucking ain't. I swear to God, my homeboy, my karate teacher, right? I took Hawaii Kempo. My karate teacher, he had him and his best friend. They both were pastors. So his best friend had a church right by my like in front of my apartment and shit. I mean, yeah, right. He had got this little building and shit, a little spot. So you know, of course, I go support and shit. My mom, my mama had already talked to him about it. She was like, you know, they don't believe in the in music and the whole.
Blue. Okay, I think my man dropped off. No, he's absolutely right, man. When you go back uh, to our folks have been spooked against it. You know, and it's not just spooked against it. Their participation in anything that was African centered or remotely resembling something close to the place of their origin that would tap them back into not just a spiritual, which is inspirational, motivational movement, but it would also tap them into real Agun reverence, and that is tied to um, habits. It's tied to health. It's tied to culture, and that is what they attempted to stomp out of us, and that's their problem with ancestral reverence because it activates all of these things in you. And there is a thing in us, this maroon, there's a free person residing in you, a very free being, a very free entity residing in you, residing in that beautiful black form that is being suppressed for no other reason than that it's in beautiful black form. I mean, we can argue about semantics about what they call us. This was the beauty of the Maroons. You know, this was one of the beauties of the components of the Haitian Revolution, the Haiti Revolution, was that they didn't trip against tribal lines, plantations, this and that. The people that worked within the plantation also coordinated with the field, who also coordinated with the Maroons, were very instrumental in the liberation of Jamaica. So it was a coordinated effort and attack, all because they were suppressed, oppressed, and wise enough to realize that they were suppressed and oppressed by the same entity. You know what I'm saying? They didn't fall for the class struggle. They didn't fall for the little bit of gifts here, little bit of things there. They realized that they was suppressed by the same entity. You know, let me see. And this is what the Maroon Society is offering that safe haven. And I know what he's talking about when he says his mother wouldn't go in a place without them drums and stuff like that. She's old school. Let's see. I don't want to. Okay, I think we may have blown that, but I wanted to go into a little bit of uh, what maroonage was. You know, we go into the Maroons, man, and we could go on and on because you gotta. I mean, just the history of it is not just educational. It is exciting. It's inspirational. You know, to know that your people did this and existed, and this is no, you know, it's no fairy tale. It's actual factual. It's just something else. Let me see if I can find what I'm looking for here. Give me a moment. I'm gonna try to get us right back to it. Give me a hot second. Hold up the chat. I can't even find what I was looking for. I had this, and it was laid out. I mean, like I said, there's so many of them, but there's a brother I listened to. Maybe I can find it here. That I thought in his explanation of maroonage did a great job. This is it's acting like it don't want to do it anyway. Let's let's X him out. I'll get the presentation together a little better next time. But maybe let's just kick it a hot second and let's talk about the Maroon Society, what we're looking for, and then we can just get into some general topics. But basically, that's what the Maroon Society is. That's what I'm launching. A platform that we can get over here and kick it, some hot topics, do what we do, safe zone. It's all welcoming. It's black empowering. You know, I know we're going to touch on some real shit because our community exists of real shit. So we're going to touch on the relationships. We're going to touch on, and I want to be current. Y'all help me keep this shit current. You know what I'm saying? Help me to keep, and when I say current, not just privy to what's going on in the outside world, because I do hope some of you Negroes peep your heads up from these monitors every blue moon. But what's current in these YouTube streets? What's going on? What's relative? I got a YouTube partner that navigates me through these streets. And actually, I got quite a few. I was surprised at how many people really saw the potential or see the potential in me as an individual, and then the potential in the channel as a platform to grow and to be a contributor. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes I might have to be a defender. That's all part of the territory. I ain't scared of it. You know what I'm saying? But to be a contributor to good content, to black excellence, to progression, to advancing and pushing our struggle forward, I look forward to that shit. You know what I'm saying? So y'all help me to remain current. Like I said, I got some people that introduced me to some good channels. I'm not gonna scream out all my favorites because they may conflict with some of you guys, but I got some people out here that are, humorous, to downright hilarious and just controversial, but they bring that heat. I ain't even gonna call it controversial. I ain't even gonna call it controversial. We done had this talk about black and nigga. We can discuss that for a minute if y'all want to, but we done had this discussion about black and nigga, and I believe nigga is like one of our superpowers. It's something that personally belongs to us. You know what I'm saying? I don't do the therapy on it. We took it from them to take the sting out of the word. Trevor, what's good, baby? What's good? I'm looking forward to catching some of them. My man Trevor, catch straight talk with Trevor. Shouts out. Appreciate the fall through. But like I said, I'm not one of those that say, hey, we're doing it to take the sting out the word. Fuck that. It's our word. If I hear a white boy use it, I'm going to try to take his block off. If I hear Espanol use it, I'm gonna try to take Migos block off. It distinctly, uniquely, specifically, particularly belongs to us. Everything else is a cop out. So I don't use it as a term of it. None of that. It is a word, and we know what it used to mean, and we've taken it into our cultural vocabulary lexicon. Is that the thing? Is that the word I'm looking for, guys? And we've adopted it or have adopted and adapted it to mean particular and certain things to us. To me, it's a superpower. It's cunning, it's craftiness, it's thinking outside the box. It's not being conventional. It's being less than up. It's being less than playing above board most times, and oftentimes it's illegal as fuck. I'm gonna keep it real when I activate my nigga shit. You know what I'm saying? But when I activate it in uh just cultural relations and listening to our people and just allowing it to be, man, the beef sector's funny as fuck. Yo, man, we are clever and we don't play no games. Ouch. I be over there listening sometimes of fun. I don't even know if I'm in the right sector. I just know, let me say the cut sector, where them niggas will pull them knives on them ginzus. Sometimes a bazooka or two pop out. Get your ass. You know, it get your ass. What you say about the sting is about empowerment. It's about removing the sting. I think it's about empowerment. It could be. I mean, that's the beauty of the whole controversy. It means so many things to so many different people, depending on generation, depending on, all of that. My question is the adaptation of the word as just the generalization of black people, meaning just that's what black people are, is it to our advantage or to our disadvantage? You know what I'm saying? And I keep hearing the same psychological, or even if you want to say social advantage they say it has. We're taking the sting from it. Is it I get it, but I mean, are you really? Are you motherfucking really? Like it still can be a fit. Are we taking the sting for, I mean, like, is it a blow to see? My problem is I don't measure shit by white folk. I don't measure shit by white folk. I don't care nothing about how they feel about that nigga word. I don't care nothing about how they feel about me. It's what you do to me. That's when we start to have the problem and the issues arise. I ain't gonna try to change your damn heart. I'm not. Shouts out to my people. Shouts out to Lex. You know what I'm saying? I'm trying to discover the nature of God. If his God has that, God's very nature is love. I'm trying to discover the understanding of that God. That's a discussion he and I have to have. It smells very Christiany to me. You know what I'm saying? I'm gonna do a play. I went back and looked up some stuff, and I was like, I went to look up Olorun, Odumare. I'm like, even the African, because I don't know all the African supreme expressions of the supreme universe. That's one I happen to be familiar with. I'm not even gonna say I know the universe in that great form and entity. I'd be lying to say if we had an intimate relation like that. But from book, one of the things going back to study, it says, it's a balance. He's the creator of this, the creator of that. The African principle is balance. Little this, little that. Not too much of this, not too much of that. But that's another discussion. So, but what we do tie upon, what we know is very much real is the ancestors and the moving and going forward. I ain't even going front. I forgot what the hell I was talking about. I'm just having a good time with y'all, man. Like I said, I'm glad to have launched the premiere of Maroon Society, man, the home of free black thought. Fall through. I dropped the chat and the link again. We can chop it up at this time. My presentation is kind of shot. I had this big, huge, wonderful presentation laid out and designed, and unfortunately, my connection just isn't quite doing it like I'd like for it to. So we're gonna turn this open house, and you know how we do, man. We I plan B's be code too, man, just as a people. So we're gonna turn this into an open house, an open forum, and just kick it. Let me see. Let me get us back right. Okay. I'm just getting back around to the chat. Let me see. With GTO. She said that's one thing black people did right. White people, for the most part, can't just drop the N word without some consequences. Hey, I guess it depends what circles you move in. I've seen some strange things of late, as of late. Hence another reason for the Maroon Society. I do believe that we need strong black culture injected. Next time I'm gonna have this video on Maroonage. I need to be trying to up because he goes through the whole like the principles, the philosophy, just everything. And one of them is a culture, and a culture that has not just persistence, not just the ability to keep hammering away at it, to keep facing that obstacle, but also resistance, to be able to fight against it. A tangible fight, man, a warrior code. The Maroons would not accept the idea, not even the idea of captivity, let alone it being a physical, something they physically embraced. They fought until they could get to Maroon societies. He may have been a captive 10, 15, 20 years until, but the vision, the goal, the constant yearning and desires was for that Maroon community that was set up. I'm gonna go through Casper Yango, who fought, the Mexicans off on one side and the Federales, the Americans on the other side, to establish a Maroon encampment. That's the call. That's the call of the Egungun. That is the call of the Egungun. That's the call of your ancestors. Maroon is complete self-dependence, self-sufficiency, and independence. That's what their call is: the breaking away and establishing your own communities. Establish your own communities. One of the things in the Maroon Society that we, attempt to do is a couple times a month, you should eat together. Pool your resources. Sit to learn to be communal, practice community. See, a lot of us haven't started where it really matters, and that's right there in our community. The culture is spread by interaction. You invite people to whatever you call the dukumbe, the dada, the dada. You know what I'm saying? And it's a real dinner. What are we doing? What are we doing here? We're pooling resources. We're sharing and practicing the spirit of communalism. We're ensuring that at least a couple families or those that participate that are part of this Maroon Society or in this little collective you do are eating for that month. You have a dinner. You know your neighbors. Then one day y'all get out there, you walk with the brothers, y'all do a trash pickup right there in your little neighborhood that you 3, 4 live in. Somebody's gonna see, little kids gonna run over and want to know what y'all doing, or why your children out there uh, doing those things. The Maroon combats and fights right where they are every day. You don't even have to maroonage is such a thought. You ain't even got to be around another Maroon. You pick the paper up, put it in the trash. You, in fact, how about you don't throw the paper down? How about that? Isn't that a novel thought? How about, how about we don't throw the paper down in the first place? This type of thing, this type of thinking, this type of independent thinking, and thinking like that independently, even though you don't see the community around you, you realize that that Mother Earth is a part of your community. That I don't need another human being around me right now to be a part of the community. Mother Earth is a part of my community, and I see this, and I'll remove this uh, trash, obstacle, hindrance, potential harm for anything, all the way down to the wild to the ant. You know what I'm saying? We're rewarded for that type of, this is the type of magnitude of custodianship that we've been given, and the Maroon understands that and jails towards people who understand that and begin to think along lines that will promote this thinking. You know what I'm saying? That will build up this philosophy in social, cultural, political, economics, and some very real shit. And some very real shit. Like I said, we going back to the Maroons, they couldn't conceptualize, their minds wouldn't allow them to process defeat and capture. It wouldn't allow them to process defeat and capture. I'm gonna get DMT up here, man. We're gonna do a whole thing on the Maroons. You ain't escaping that, Double Master. You ain't escaped that, boy. You officially got passport into Maroon Society. You ain't escaping that teaching. Because this is that's a must need teaching. So their intellect, their very logic, that uh intuition, that everything in them, just they could, to see other human beings in that condition. Can you imagine being Shanko, being forced to do some shit that you didn't want to do and all of that, and you a free person, your spirit is free? That just didn't sync with them. So they fall, and here it is, they fall into, they establish their own place to develop that. They were very practical and real about their situation. They didn't trip on tribalism. They didn't trip on religion. They didn't trip on any of that. They were very practical and real about a tangible situation. And that situation was, this motherfucker is the devil. No ifs, ands, and buts to visit this type of horror on another being. You know what I'm saying? We have to understand. See, it's easy right now to process all these things. Hell, we live in that age. Television, you got the movies depicting the gore and the guts and all of these things. We're desensitized like you wouldn't believe. We are desensitized like you wouldn't believe. But can you imagine being closest to your purest form? You know what I'm saying? That you, the earth, provides the resources that you need, that your warfare is very mild compared to warfare across the globe at that particular time, or what the savages participated in. And called warfare was just butchery and brutality. You know what I'm saying? So can you imagine this mentality being visited upon your little slice of paradise? And so not only the shock of that being visited upon you, and their part of their culture being barbarity, that they were mastering certain aspects of warfare and torture and espionage, very tools and traits of the devil. They were practicing a mastery of these things to implement. So they implement them, and what was the outcome. That was the outcome. But we're talking about the development because I'm one who, as a Maroon, believes that us over here have a very unique character. We are the extension of the African saga. We are the extension of the African saga. We have just as much right to an identity as our cousins and brothers and sisters throughout the diaspora. The Cubans don't argue about the identity of being Cubans, the Puerto Ricans, the West Indians, the Jamaicans. And yet, when it comes to you and I, we wage the most vicious fights over semantics that don't really, at the end of the day, produce any type of tangible results. Because if you know, it would be different. I don't know what it would be different like, so I'm not even gonna say that. I'm not gonna sit here and pretend that I could see a difference in it, and not rallying around the very reality of what is. And what you can touch is social, political, economics, and cultural influences and persuasions. You can touch that. You can begin to fight back against that. And this is what the Maroons did. They never took, oh, you outnumbered this. No, they went off to they said they did their thing and they defended that. Like they said down in Florida, the Negro Fort. They said these brothers had cannons, guns, swords, and armory, making weapons. They began to become self-sufficient. They begin to become self-sufficient. And then as the Maroon, when you study Maroon enclaves, when you study Maroon encampments and Maroon communities, when you see these runaway slaves running up in there, just all of these slaves weren't just field hands or weren't this. A lot of these were from different elements of the society that had them enslaved. So they would run to this, so the blacksmith would escape. And now they got a blacksmith, the farmers, the builders, so a community began to evolve. In Jamaica, they were so cold. I forget what they're called. I'm gonna have the Bush doctor come on, man. Shaka G Jaga. Shouts out to Maroon Society, my man Shaka G Jaga. I'm gonna have him come on, and he tells he tells the story of the Jamaican Maroons, that they were so cold, the people feared them, they would jump out and snatching the children and running them off the Maroon villages. Not that I advocate that, but that's how they was growing their villages. Fuck around if you want to, be in collaboration if you want to, out at the marketplace, shopping for the enemy, snatch a child and run to the mountains, raising them to be fighters. Crazy history, you know. But it's this type of radicalism, is this type of love of freedom and continuancy, the continuation of them as a people, uh, that they fought for, the measures they would go through. Now, I'm not asking for that drastic measures. I'm just asking for your participation. Fall through, contribute. You know what I'm saying? Bring your topics. Shit, bring whatever, and we can kick it. Listen, I'm gonna try to get this because I really want to get this thing going. But I just wanted to. I'm a work on it. I'm not gonna be long because I do want to work on trying to get the stream going. But just wanted to. That's one of the things, man, that I just wanted to bring. Gonna also bring a lot of, like I said, bring a lot of hot topics. We're gonna address. It's gonna be probably what looks like a lot of damn backpedaling. You know what I'm saying? But I do have to address some things. I'm going to have to address the Constitution. I'm going to have to address the position of the black man here in America. So there's going to be a lot of things that are going to have to be addressed. Set the record straight. Set the precedent. You know what I'm saying? Put down my own foot. Stand on my own two type shit. But it's all, everything's always done in love and respect. With that, man, I can't think of anything else. Man, what else we want to talk about? Like I said, since my presentation got shot, it kind of threw me. Hold on, you know what though? I may take a quick shot at trying to get this. Let me give me one more half a second. All right, I'm gonna try it again. I'm gonna try it again. Uh, we're gonna do it again. I'm gonna try to play this thing, man. Like I said, I appreciate y'all bearing with me and get it. But let's get it. Yeah, Lex, I'm trying to do the most. So let me see if I can get it in. All right, man. I appreciate y'all bearing patient. I'm gonna get it. We are gonna get it. All right, I got the slowest connection. Gotta be the slowest connection.
Said it's 11:59 on the clock of destiny, and life is like a minute, only 60 seconds in it. Forced upon you, can't refuse it. Didn't seek it, didn't choose it, but it's up to you to use it. You'll suffer if you lose it. Give account if you abuse it. It's only a minute, but eternity is in it. And with that minute, you, me, and we can change and transform the world. I am honored to be with you today to share a few words and ideas on the topic of the mentality of the Maroons. Mentality of the Maroons. Let me first bring greetings from Clark Atlanta University School of Education, where I am very proud, blessed, and pleased to serve on the faculty in the Department of Educational Leadership. I also want to bring you greetings from Saba Academy Online, which was founded by my wife, Willette Akua, where we're bringing out the brilliance in our children with online tutoring and teaching of the Atlanta University Center. And so we welcome his presence and guidance in this presentation. We want to make this low screenshots and to share anything that you find to be of interest to you on social media. And feel free to tag me on it, whether it's Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube. And as you know, if you've seen me speak before, then you know I show a lot of pictures and images because we know that a picture is worth 1,000 words. And so I'm reminded of the great words of Listerville Middleton, who says, sharpen and understand what you hear. You'll have to look with more than just your two physical eyes. You'll have to look with what our ancestors called the ujat. Now, some people call it the third eye, but we know it's really the first eye of intuition that allows us to see beyond the physical realm and dig deep into the mental and spiritual dimensions. So once again, sharpen your eye and tune your ears so you know what you see and understand what you hear. So if you're ready to get started, let's jump right into it. We're going to be talking about the mentality of the Maroons, the mindset of the Maroons. And this presentation is broken into several sessions. It's about 3 or 4 sessions. And each session will probably be maybe about 10 minutes long. But the intent is to share some information in digestible portions so that it's easy to understand and easy to receive. So session 1 is going to be dealing with origins. When I say this title, Mentality of the Maroons, the question may arise in your mind, well, what is a Maroon? And that's a great question. Matter of fact, that's a question I had many years ago when someone handed me this book by Dr. Asa Hilliard called The Maroon Within Us. The subtitle was Selected Essays on African American Community Socialization. But again, it was hard for me to get past anything until I found out what a Maroon was. And then I found out the answer. You see, Maroons were Africans who refused to be enslaved. The word maroon comes from the Spanish word cimarron, meaning wild cow or escaped cattle living in the wild. Maroons escaped and created communities in the swamps of North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida. But they also escaped into the hills and mountains of Jamaica and other islands of the Caribbean, Central and South America. So when he calls the book The Maroon Within Us, as a psychologist, Dr. Hilliard is calling attention to that part of us that refuses to be enslaved. That there's a part of us that is observing everything that's going on in our families, in our communities, and in the world. And we're looking at the forces and factors in society that attempt to oppress us, but there is a part of us that is attached to our Creator that refuses to be bound, that refuses to be oppressed, and that refuses to be enslaved. And that is the part of us that Dr. Hilliard is speaking to in this book. He also tells us that Maroons were completely self-sufficient and self-determined to remain that way. One more time, Maroons were completely self-sufficient and self-determined to remain that way. Now, when someone has been enslaved, they are very skillfully, mentally manipulated into believing that someone else will provide their needs for them, that someone else will provide for them what they should be providing for themselves. But a Maroon is completely self-sufficient and determined to remain that way. I want you to remember that third point. He also tells us that accepting the unnatural as normal without criticism is virtual insanity. So back during the times of the Ma'afa, the catastrophic enslaved, that there's a part of us that is observing everything that's going on in our families, in our communities, and in the world. And we're looking at the forces and factors in society that attempt to oppress us, but there is a part of us that is attached to our Creator that refuses to be bound, that refuses to be oppressed, and that refuses to be enslaved. And that is the part of us that Dr. Hilliard is speaking to in this book. He also tells us that Maroons were completely self-sufficient and self-determined to remain that way. One more time, Maroons were completely self-sufficient and self-determined to remain that way. Now, when someone has been enslaved, they are very skillfully, mentally manipulated into believing that someone else will provide their needs for them, that someone else will provide for them what they should be providing for themselves. But a Maroon is completely self-sufficient and determined to remain that way. I want you to remember that third point. He also tells us that accepting the unnatural as normal without criticism is virtual insanity. So back during the times of the Ma'afa, the catastrophic interruption of African sovereignty and civilization, back at the onset of our captivity, there were those who were terrorized into accepting the unnatural as normal. They were terrorized into accepting the notion that we should be working for free or next to free. They were terrorized into accepting the notion that we were inferior. They were terrorized into accepting the notion that we could not rule over ourselves and provide for ourselves. They were terrorized into accepting all of these things so that we would lose our self-determination and sense of self-sufficiency. As a matter of fact, the system was was so deeply entrenched that there were those that would develop a term for those Africans who chose to attempt to escape. Not only did they come up with the term Cimarron or Maroon, but there was a psychological assessment of those that attempted to escape, and they were diagnosed to have drapetomania. Can you imagine that? Drapetomania was a psychological disorder that Africans were said to have when they tried to escape enslavement. And this is why Dr. Hilliard tells us again, accepting the unnatural as normal and without criticism is virtual insanity. And so there always have to be those among us who are constantly giving a critical cultural critique of what's going on in our communities, in our nation, and in the world. And we should never accept the unnatural as normal and without criticism. Otherwise, we end up insane. And so there were those Africans who escaped, but those Africans who escaped cannot necessarily be said to be Maroons, because Dr. Hilliard calls our attention to the concept of escape from escape. Let's see what he means by that. He says there were Maroons who escaped, but then there were those captive Africans who sought to escape from escape. What does he mean?
No wonder y'all couldn't hear me. Can you hear me now? There you go. No wonder y'all couldn't hear me. Wasn't on the. Now he's gonna go into what I went into. I hate y'all missed the whole first thing I was talking about of Maroonish, but we'll keep it going. He's gonna go into what you always hear me talking about, uh, escapism. You know what you hear me talking about escape within an escape. I don't say it like that. I say escapism. It's creation is nothing wrong. That's part of what we're going to do. I believe that we're gods. So creation is a part of that whole process. Creating a better condition for us is a natural process, a natural evolution. The not bringing it into fruition, not having a plan to bring it into fruition, not starting a real concrete effort to bring it in fruition, but just more ideas and ideas and ideas about it is escapism. Now the doctor's going to go into uh, escape from escape, escape from escape, and the Maroon understanding of it all.
Mean by this? He's saying they turned away from any quest for self. Excessive indulgence in entertainment, alcohol, and drugs were the pathways. Do we not see that today as well? excessive indulgence in entertainment, weapons of mass deception, weapons of mass distraction, right? Excessive indulgence in entertainment, alcohol, and drugs were pathways. This sense of escape from escape. In other words, you have those Africans who were organizing and mobilizing, bringing people together. They were on the move, educating the people of the best ways to escape and preserve their culture and to achieve freedom and liberation and sovereignty. But then there are those who just wanted to escape from escape. I don't want to hear all that black stuff. I don't want to hear any of that kind of stuff, right? Escape from escape. And in attempting to escape from escape, they indulged in excessive indulgence in entertainment, alcohol, and drugs. These are the same things that we see going on today. So, again, it's important that we understand the difference between escape versus maroonage. You see, simple escape and simple freedom were liberty without an aim. Liberty without an aim. But maroonage, on the other hand, was freedom for the purpose of survival and cultural continuity. Okay? So it wasn't just freedom to go and sit on the bus next to anybody that you want to sit on. It wasn't.
That's the key. Let's touch on that. Let's touch on that. Simple escape and simple freedom were liberty without aim. Liberty without aim, without an end game. You know, that's a continuation of the domestication process. But maroonage establishing our own, creating our own communities, our own concepts and understanding, being inviting, embracing to our people who are seeking liberty and freedom. Liberty and freedom, not control of another, masses, not to be another religious movement, not to be the king or the messiah or the priest or the princess of a movement, but there to create a community, a tangible community of free, loving, melanated people, African individuals, was maroonage. Maroonage, on the other hand, was freedom for the purpose of survival and cultural continuity. My man's breaking it down. All right, let's keep rocking. I agree, Lex. The end game is the independent. I agree with it. The end game is an independent black nation. This is the prelude. This is the footsteps. The Marooners community, like, they're going to be a lot of what, you know, I hold as a Maroon and going to be pushing and promoting that the Maroon Society is going to mirror and lock in step with Dark Side. I think the aims, the goals, the objectives are great ones. There probably will be some things we disagree with. We're a little more inclusive. Taking on the maroon spirit is a little more inclusive. It's about more tangible freedoms and liberties. You know, it's about those who want to express that in their tangible, practical. And are taking on the that uh, black. When we say black, we're taking that also to mean social and political, economic. So when we take that to be a part of the definition, we understand um, that who is the enemy of that progression in those areas, social, political, and economic progression. You know what I'm saying? And so when we know that we all possess the same enemy, then the religions or what I ate for dinner, what you ate for dinner, or how if you wear your hair wrapped and I don't wear my hair wrapped are inconsequential. You know what I'm saying? The bigger picture remains survival and cultural continuity to right for you to be able to wear your hair wrapped. But that's going to come from the survival and coming around understanding uh, what he's saying. I don't think so, brother. I don't think so. I think that's you know I don't think so. You're gonna get into when you get it when he starts going into maroonage because you're a modern maroon. You know what I'm saying? That's the whole thing. Today you're a modern, or I don't know if you're a modern maroon. Today we're modern maroons. There are still people fighting slavery. fighting against slavery in its forms, in its economic forms of oppression, and the new forms that has manifested itself, the abuse of the so-called 13th Amendment, the preschool to prison pipeline. You know, there's still those of us that are fighting against mental slavery, the negative stereotype and images of African people. That's why I fight so hard against nigga. No, brother. Maroon still, we still exist. You know, we still exist. So I understand what you're saying about cultural continuity, keeping our culture, but that's when he goes into what our culture is, it's our cultural continuity is a necessity. Here's where the problems where you and I may disagree heavily. I think you heavily lean on, not lean on. I think it's good that you resurrect a ancient African culture, that you're reconnecting us to the African ties, but I think you trivialize and downplay our struggle here. I've heard you say, you know, if you gave us clothes, we'd have opted out for a different. But I think you really make a mockery of the ego when you trivialize our struggle here to such a degree. So I'll divert or even I'll acquiesce to the conversation to give you that because of the reverence I hold for our ancestors. But I don't think you really get it on that sense, and especially on the sense of cultural continuity. You can't erase or escape the very real presence we have here and the history that we have here, because then that negates some of the traumas placed upon us, and then it's hard to explain those behaviors. Yeah, I mean, listen. Here's your opportunity. I get it, man. I'm the Yanger. Here's your opportunity to get those shots in, baby. You know, but you have to. If I challenge it hard enough, you have to go back on one of those shows and really find where I advocated escapism or where I advocated complete adherence to a assimilationist or a homogenizing philosophy, total assimilation or integration. You'll never hear me advocate or push that, but you will catch me in team spirit and remaining silent. And if they say silence against some things is condone and take guilty, I'm not going to be the one to try to wiggle out of it. Guilty. So now is your opportunity to get the pot shots, because with the Maroon Society, with this platform, it's a place for people like you and I and Blue and other people out there to really throw some ideas out there. And just like the Maroons, nothing's too radical in the advancement of us as a people or maintaining our liberation once achieved. So let me play a little bit of this and I'll get to some of these questions. I even bring you up, brother. Let me, I want to, but I do want to get the brother in. And I'm going to bring you right up.
Wasn't just freedom to go to any restroom that you wanted to, or to drink from any drinking fountain. Certainly, these were things that we're thankful for our elders and ancestors for fighting those battles for us, because we do have the human right to do those things. But Maroonage was very, very different from that. Again, Maroonage was freedom for the purpose of survival and cultural continuity. But not only that, the ability of us to rule over ourselves and not allow ourselves to be ruled over or controlled by others. That's a very serious distinction and critical distinction that we need to make. I'm very thankful to one of my teachers, Grandmaster Babataji Nanji, who is a tremendous cultural and community treasure amongst us. He is very well known in the community as a martial artist and as a personal protection specialist. He's also known as an outstanding educator and many other things. He's been an amazing contributor to the community for decades now. But I'm calling his expertise to your attention because he's the one that began to teach me in his instruction of the martial arts about ancient African traditions of warriorhood, maroonage, and personal protection. So if we're going to talk about the maroon within us, we have to go back to a time when we were not being dominated by other people to see what we were doing to protect ourselves from that. Okay? And so one of the places and one of the people that Grandmaster Babataji Nanji directed my attention to was Brother Baba Balagun Abigunde. And he has a book called African Martial Arts, Discovering the World, the Warrior Within. Now, in this book, he tells us that the oldest evidence of the combat arts dates back to 2800 BC in Africa in ancient Kemet. So you may say, well, Brother Chico, why are you talking about the combat arts, the ancient combat arts? Because in order for a Maroon to be a Maroon, before they could escape, they had to defend themselves. They had to rise up. They had to take arms. They had to make a self-conscious, self-determined decision to take arms and seek their freedom, their liberation, and their sovereignty. And we'll talk about the difference between freedom and sovereignty a little bit later. So we have to look at some of the warrior traditions that went on in Africa so that we'll understand how these captive Africans kept those warrior traditions alive in order to achieve Maroonage and sovereignty. So Baba Balagun tells us that the oldest evidence of combat arts dates back to 2800 BC in Africa and ancient Kemet. On the walls of the tombs of Beni Hassan, there are over 500 fighting figures, demonstrating the ancient African Kemetic advanced knowledge of weapons, kicking, striking, joint locks, and throws. It was a complete system of combat. This is another picture coming from the walls of the temple at Beni Hassan. And there were African scholars and martial artists who have studied these glyphs very, very carefully and tested the application of these glyphs. As I said, joint locks, throws, kicks, punches, stick fighting, all sorts of different things to be able to demonstrate the effectiveness of this complete combat system. Now, we can also go to the research of Dr. Runoko Rashidi, peace be upon him. He was certainly Ma'at Keru, meaning true of voice, and he made his transition earlier this year while he was in Egypt. So we send ancestral blessings his way. But he tells us in his book, African Star Over Asia, The Black Presence in the East, there's a Japanese proverb which says, for a samurai to be brave, he must have a bit of black blood.
Look at that. I gotta say something about that. They say a Japanese proverb for for a samurai to be brave, he must have a bit of black blood. The damn Japanese samurai claiming Negroes, and some of y'all don't, some of us don't even want to be black. Celebrated throughout the world, but I thought that was interesting, man. That whole fighting style, and defense thing, I thought that was real interesting. Let me get back to it, man. I don't want to hold it up. I just thought this was another interesting fact too, that they got proverbs about having black blood.
And for those of you who are familiar with Dr. Rashidi's work, he tells us a great deal about the African presence in early Asia and not just the presence, but the influence of Africans in Asia, and in particular in the fighting arts. As early as 1926, when Drusilla Dunjee Houston released the book Wonderful Ethiopians of the Ancient Kushite Empire, 10 of the 17 chapters in that book focus on the African presence in early Asia, okay? So when we look at the origins of the so-called martial arts, we are very, very clear about where they began. Now, this is not to take anything away from Asian martial artists or those that are practitioners by any stretch of the imagination. Certainly, they have mastered many of these different kinds of arts, whether from China, whether from Japan, whether from Korea, or any of the other Asian nations that have mastered the different martial arts. But it is important to understand that we as African people were the originators, and that we passed on these arts to many different indigenous people around the globe. And all people have their fighting arts, and we certainly have ours as well. Okay, and so Baba Balagoon tells us that Asia's link to the African martial arts dates back to the Dravidians of India and the Moors of Africa. The Dravidians were descendants of India's older black civilization, the Harappan, who migrated to Africa, from Africa to India. And now I want to talk about, since he mentions the Moors, let's talk about their involvement in this. Because as I began to train with Grandmaster Babataji Nanji, I noticed that we were doing a lot of what today would be called the Filipino martial arts. And we were doing stick fighting and different things of that nature. And one day I asked Baba, I said, Baba, if your Imafi blend system, he is the creator of the Imafi blend system, which is an African-based martial arts system. However, Grandmaster Babataji Nanji has 15 black belts in a number of different arts, okay? And so I said, well, if this is an African-based system, why is so much of what we're doing coming out of Filipino martial arts and with the stick fighting and different things and knife fighting and knife defense and different things of that nature? He said, well, he said the art of Kali coming out of Filipino martial arts, there's a part of the Philippines, the southern Philippines, which is referred to as Moro Moro, and it's called Moro Moro in recognition of the Moorish contribution. And so the Filipino arts have preserved a lot of the Moorish traditions of stick fighting and knife defense. And certainly Baba Balagoon records this again in the book African Martial Arts Discovering the Warrior Within. He says that the Moors, African warriors and scholars who adopted Islam as their way of life, brought the martial arts to Indonesia and the Philippines over 1,000 years ago, giving the indigenous people the arts of Eskrima, Kali, Arnis, and Pencak Silat. In fact, the Filipino martial arts are still referred to as Moro Moro in recognition of the Moorish contribution. So with these things in mind, what I would like for you to know is that we have a very, very distinguished tradition of excellence and innovation in the fighting arts. Now, this is going to come in very handy and will be very important when Africans start to seek their freedom in the midst of attempted captivity. When Europeans attempt to enslave us, these fighting arts will become very, very important. Now, I do want you to know that we have a number of resources to continue to educate you even after this particular presentation. One of those resources, you can go to www.freeintrotoafricanorigins.com. Again, freeintrotoafricanorigins.com. On this platform, on that platform rather, it will send you 6 free videos. When you put your email address in, it will send you 6 free videos.
And I bet you what a lot of you guys are finding out is that a lot of you guys have a maroon mentality and didn't even really know it. A lot of you guys, I'm sure, are down with the defending yourself, looking for self-sufficiency, independent, and ready to maintain that determination, or determined to maintain that status, especially once that status is achieved in totality, in its entirety. Liberation of freedom, you're going to be determined to maintain it. But you will find that a lot of you now possess this maroon mentality for striving for this freedom, striving for this liberation.
One per day for 6 days straight on a variety of different topics relative to African origin. So I encourage you to take advantage of that free resource. Again, it's called Free Intro to African Origins. All right. So now that we've talked a little bit about origins, let's now talk in session 2 a little bit about resistance. Because one of the key components in the mentality of the Maroons is their sense of resistance. not allowing certain things to happen. See, there's certain things, you've heard it said before, that
Here's where the separation is going to come in. You find with the Maroon thought pattern in a lot of organizations and institutions out there. Defense is one thing. We talked about the defense. He showed how that is just, from the techniques. I guess, when you just even showing how we were defense, people that were able to defend ourselves, going all the way to the techniques that other peoples have adapted. But now we're talking about the spirit of resistance. And this is where the push and the challenge comes in.
that there are people who watch things happen, and there are people who make things happen, and then there are people who wonder, man, what happened, right? No, the Maroons were those that made things happen. They didn't just watch things happen, they resisted oppression. And we need people today who will resist oppression wherever they may happen to see it. And resisting oppression, part of that may be speaking out about it, but that's not all there is about it. Another part of that would be fighting back against it, but that's not all there is about it. We have to create realities and communities that repel oppression and that are resistant to oppression. And we'll get to that a little bit later. But it's very important for us to understand that in large measure, we were not taught about those Africans who won in the battle against oppression and slavery. Now, Herbert Aptheker tells us in the book American Negro Slave Revolts, he tells us that there were over 250 documented revolts. In other words, back during that time, Europeans were very meticulous in documenting these things because they were trying to put things in place to make sure that these things never happened again, that revolts never occurred. So they documented whenever there was a revolt. Well, we know that there was Gaspar Yanga and Nanny of the Maroons down in Mexico. And we know about the Haitian Revolution, which we'll talk about a little bit later, with Boukman Dutty and Dessalines and Toussaint Louverture. Probably the most well-known revolt that many of us have heard of would be that of Nat Turner, okay? The three most prominent revolts amongst Africans in America was Nat Turner, Denmark Vesey, and Gabriel Prosser. And then there was also the Stono Rebellion in South Carolina. But in large measure, we were never taught about those Africans who actually won their freedom and created sovereign Maroon communities. We love General Nat Turner and Denmark Vesey and Gabriel Prosser for the sacrifice that they made. Certainly, these are monumental Africans. But in the end, in their quest for liberation, they were killed. But you and I need to understand that there were those who were successful, who defeated their captors and went on to establish free, liberated, and sovereign communities and even nations. Okay. The other thing that the other myth that I want to put to rest and dispel is the notion that we didn't fight back. In my research, one of the things that I've come to understand is that we were always either planning a revolt, in the midst of a revolt, or coming out of a revolt. Remember, there are over 250 documented revolts in American history. That tells us it was at least one was happening per year.
Let's stop there. Let's stop there. Don't let them tell you wasn't no head busters. Been busting heads. Been giving it to their ass. Been bringing it to them. Don't let them tell you wasn't no head busters. My man did the math on it. He said that tells him mathematically, statistically, that tells him there was one revolt a year. We didn't lay down for this shit. And then, like he said, everybody, they're going to always flaunt. There again, I go back to tell you, the conqueror writes history. So they're going to always flaunt their conquests. They're always going to, and exacerbate, make larger than the penalties that they visited upon the revolutionaries, or the rebels, they call them. They're going to, first of all, the penalties are going to be horrific, but when they retell it in the story, it's going to be just that much more uh, horrific. They're going to get a hero a little play, just a little play, just enough play so that you'll feel like, oh, we have a hero in him, but the end tale is one of tragedy and woe. And they never tell you, or they haven't told you and I about these revolts and rebellions and people that were successful. Hence again, my man on top of that list, Caspar Younger. It was like he himself, Younger, said he let me carry the name. When I read it, I heard him say Younger. I said, that's it. I'll carry it. I'll carry you. Can I rock it? Younger? I'll carry it. Been a Maroon. Been a Maroon. I may go into a little Caspar Younger, tell you how he got down. But this is the thing that, we're talking about. So the Maroon mentality, that freedom. And one of the things is that aids to the Maroon mentality is knowing that we have had successful people go off and form their communities, and communities build nations. But it starts with a community. So there have been communities, black communities, that have succeeded, left from, and beat out their own motherfucking destiny and maintained that destiny.
And so we were always either planning a revolt, in the midst of a revolt, or coming out of a revolt. We didn't just accept our enslavement and lay down and allow it to happen. Certainly there were those Africans who were terrorized into such a state of fear and compliance that they did, but overwhelmingly, we never accepted our captivity. We never accepted enslavement. We were always either planning a revolt, in the midst of a revolt, or coming out of a revolt. And so I'd like to suggest that we not accept a lot of the oppressive circumstances that we see going on today, that we need to study the mentality of the Maroons. How were they able to overthrow the yoke of oppression? How were they able to establish their own communities and even countries, and establish and maintain their sovereignty? These are the things that I want us to think about, because you can get so caught up in seeking equity that you give up the notion of achieving sovereignty. And sovereignty is complete self-sufficiency. But I'll give a more comprehensive definition of sovereignty a little bit later. I want to highly encourage you to look at the Haitian Revolution and study what they did. Macandal, Boukman, Dessalines, and Toussaint. And you may have seen, if you haven't seen it, you should see 1804, The Hidden History of Haiti. That came out in 2017, an amazing production from the producer of Hidden Colors. Just a very well done documentary. I highly recommend it, that you take a look at it. And if you've already seen it, it would be worth watching again and again, because this is an example of Africans who not only resisted oppression, but overthrew their captors to the point of producing Haiti as the first free republic in the Western Hemisphere. And when they defeated the French were arguably the strongest military in the world at that time. And they beat the French so bad that in order to recoup some of their losses, the French general Napoleon had to sell off some of France's colonized or conquered lands. And the defeat of the French by the Haitians is what led to the selling of the Louisiana Territory, or what we know today as the Louisiana Purchase, which contained a lot more than just what we know as today the state of Louisiana. It contained a great deal of that land mass mass in the South and Southwest. And so Napoleon had to sell that off just to recoup some of the losses that he experienced in the Haitian Revolution. So they are the quintessential example of Maroonage, and we can learn a lot about the mentality of the Maroons from studying about the Haitian Revolution. This presentation is just introductory in nature to get you into the thinking, the mentality, and the mindset of
Man, it's for in the Maroon Society. Haiti, speaking of Haitis, that's one of those sacred sites. That's one of the sacred sites, not only for its political significance, but also for its spiritual powers. Hades is one of the sacred lands. You talk about Hajj and Umrah or pilgrimage to Rome or Jerusalem or wherever these people are taking these pilgrimages. But we're saying that if you can't physically go to Hades and visit Hades and to embody the spiritual power and to go lay eyes upon political power, real slave rebellion, and you're going to have to look past the exterior. The exterior looks like that intentionally. They want to dissuade you, they want to discourage you, they want to show you the ugliest version of what fighting for your liberation can look like. This is what that's about. So we can't fall for that. We can't fall for that trick. But we go uh to let me see if I can. We go to look at, when I say political power, to look at political power, look at the potential. We have to sometimes see in real life the potential. So when you go and you step foot on Haiti's soils, then you're realizing this is a place that former slaves, enslaved Africans, enslaved human beings, shook the shackles of not just colonialism but real physical terror off of them, and won their independence. And they didn't win their independence by fucking around. They didn't win it by fucking around. They couldn't conceptualize. They had the maroon mentality. They couldn't conceptualize captivity. Their bodies, their limbs wouldn't allow them to be subjugated to such a condition. So they had to do what they damn had to do. And so going to Hades, I said that to say that Hades is one of our sacred sites. They must visit. They must visit. And if you can't go physically, I'll turn you on to some people that I'm working with that are relief aides for Hades. Then we send out physical stuff. This is how we, like the Maroon mentality, encourage freedom. We talk about Pan-Africanism. We have a whole free nation. Yes, shouts out to our mother Africa, but we also throughout the diaspora have places that could use our aid and assistance, and places that have shaken the shackles of colonialism and then still being exploited and penalized for daring to love freedom. Crazy as shit.
of the Maroons. One of our great elders, and Mwalimu Baruti tells us in his book, Notes Toward Higher Ideals in African Intellectual Liberation, he says, the most concrete evidence of warriorhood is seen in action, consistent, long-term action. And so you should ask yourself, take a mental inventory right now. Who are those Africans that I know who have been in it to win it? And I'm talking about from the time that you knew them to now. I'm talking about for years, for decades, when it was popular, when it was unpopular, in season and out of season. Who are those consistent Africans that you have seen engaged in action, consistent long-term action in building businesses, in building schools or other institutions, in educating the people? Who are those people who have been involved in consistent long-term action? Because that's one of the greatest evidences of warriorhood and Maroonage. And we should all be thinking along those lines. And I want you to know it's not easy to persist for years and for decades, because I'm one that has 3 decades in the struggle. And I once heard somebody say, they attributed these words to Malcolm X, though I don't know if Malcolm said it or not, but these are some really tremendous words that I can definitely resonate with. And the quote says, it's easier to stand up than it is to stay up. I want you to think about that for a minute. It's easier to stand up than to stay up. To be consistently committed to this kind of work over a long period of time, or for our Maroon ancestors to be committed to the death for not only the liberation of our people, but for us to return to sovereignty, complete self-sufficiency over everything that we have. All right. And so now we've looked at resistance. Now in session 3, we want to look at persistence. Persistence. All right. And Dr. Hilliard gives us some further clarification about Maroons and the mentality of Maroons. He says intellectual Maroonage is not just escape, but establishment of alternative ways of knowing and being in the world.
Important again, we're talking about that. He goes into escapism, just touching briefly on escapism and intellectual maroonage. The difference between just an intellectual and intellectual maroonage. Like he says, intellectual maroonage is not just escape, not just, you know, theorizing, you know, and you could, well, like they talked about escape earlier, also substances, drug, alcohol, entertainment, overindulgence, anything that pulls you away from your reality. But also you have the intellectuals that practice escapism through over theorizing and just all the other bullshit that comes with intellectual masturbation. But intellectual maroonage is alternative ways of knowing and being in the world. Alternative ways of knowing and being in the world. And I'm going to let him go a little bit into that, but I want you to think about alternative ways of knowing and being in this very real, tangible world. This is intellectual maroonage. This is the importance of our contributions to the Maroon Society, to this channel, to this page, period, but also to the Maroon way of life. To not be, stuck in a rut, so to speak.
When he's talking about intellectual maroonage, and there's a brother by the name of Dr. Uhuru Hotep, who has written about intellectual maroonage. And that is those professors among us and scholars and researchers who refuse to participate in basically in Western scholarly ways and who have chosen a completely different path based on maroonage, where we are researching our best traditions and lifting those up and reconstructing them and putting them back into the hands of those that created them. So Dr. Hilliard tells us intellectual maroonage is not just escape, but establishment of alternative ways of knowing and being in the world. And certainly Dr. Hilliard would be an example of that intellectual maroonage. Other intellectual maroons would include Dr. John Henrik Clarke, Dr. Ivan Van Sertima, Dr. Marimba Ani, Dr. Naeem Akbar, as I mentioned earlier, Imwalimu Baruti, so many different ones that we can call our attention to, who have rescued and reconstructed our history and culture and put it back into our hands. Dr. Maulana Karenga, Dr. Sheikh Anta Diop, Dr. Theophilo Benga, my elder and my Jegna, Dr. Joyce King. So many, all right? In addition to that, he tells us intellectual maroonage is not just about resistance, but restoration of traditional ways. And this is a very, very important point, because We can get so caught up in resisting oppression that we never build anything. One more time, we can get so caught up in resisting oppression that we
Of course, not the reincarnation of the Maroons, brother. You're a Maroon. You're a Maroon. You choose to call your community Dark Side. Dark Side is a Maroon community. I think that's what DMT, that's what Blue was alluding to. Like he said, he just never really wanted to touch on the issue because of the can of worms it opens up, how people will try, get into semantics and shit like that. No, absolutely. You're not the reincarnation of a Maroon. You are a Maroon. It's from your Egun. That's what we're showing you. It's ancestral. Yes, you have been called and chosen by the ancestors. Yes, you feel the pulsation in your blood and the urgency to do what you're doing in the manifestation and the form of dark side. I call it Maroonism. But you're a Maroon. I recognize that when I heard it. I have some questions about how sometimes it's always manifested, but nonetheless, overall in the conception of it and where you're going with is Maroonage. That's what I think. You're being amazed. You're discovering that. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to blow the lid off the thing. No, there's truly nothing new under the sun, man. It just is your time, young brother. It's your time to push this message and take this message. And what I can do, I hope that I can be of aid and assistance in helping you push the message. But nonetheless, it's Maroonage. It's Maroonage. It was established from the first time we started breaking off and doing our own thing and railing and fighting against what the oppressor was laying down and trying to push to us as normalcy. Like they said, accepting something unnatural as normal is insanity. The first time they tried to push this unnatural lifestyle on us, and those of us that started rejecting the programming of the Matrix began to create these societies and these communities. It is so what we're feeling is an extension of our Egungun, of our ancestors. Beautiful, wonderful. Let's go back to the video.
never build anything. So the question that I have for you now is, what are you building? Not you as an individual, but what organization are you a part of that is building something? Each of us, as Kwame Ture used to say, organize, 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 because institutions will always defeat individuals. So we need to be a part of institutions and be about the business of building institutions. So what institution or organization are you a part of? Because intellectual maroonage is not just about resistance. Resistance is important, but that's not all it is. It's about restoration. Restoration of what? Our traditional ways. All right. So we've got to find this delicate balance now between protest and production. You see, if I'm so involved in protest, whenever somebody says something or does something that I don't like, and now I want to protest it and I want to make people aware of it and tell them what they said was wrong or what they did was wrong and hold up picket signs and march and different things like that. There is a time for that. I don't mean to downplay that. There is a time for that. But if we're not careful, we can get so wrapped up in protest, again, that we're not producing anything. So how do we find the balance between protest and production? How can we cultivate a climate of production of the things that make us more self-sufficient and less vulnerable to white terrorism? And less vulnerable to black on black self-hate. And this is something that we have to think of as we dig deep into the mentality of the Maroons. They were about producing a different reality, not just protesting the current reality. One more time, they weren't just about protesting the current reality, they were about producing a new reality. What new reality are you and I producing? What organization or institution are we a part of that is doing that? This is part of the mentality of the Maroons. And so what systems then do we need to have in place? If we say, okay, We're going to be Maroons. We're going to escape the madness. Well, that comes with a price to be paid. That comes with certain things that need to be put in place. So what systems do we need to have in place for food? I mean, when the pandemic hit and we were seeing on the evening news, we were seeing lines upon lines of cars lined up to get food because the supply lines had been interrupted and disrupted. So what systems do we have in place?
Here's the other thing about the Maroon too. We jump into action. Like we were talking about, Jackson, Mississippi, getting these supply lines, getting programs. We jump. The Maroon is literally a safe haven. The Maroon mentality is translated through Maroon actions by the things he's going to talk about: food, water, clothing, shelter. Really making this mentality translate into tangible. The Maroon society I belong to, we have land in down outside of some parts of John said, some parts of Georgia, some parts of Carolina. We have one person actually who has a home on the land that we've contributed to go in. And land is cheaper than you damn think. Land is cheaper than you think. If you brothers and sisters could get together communally and collectively and sponsor, land is cheaper than you think. You just have to be rugged and be a visionary. Like I don't see a mansion on the land anytime, but some big thing on the land for me. But what does this look like for my children? What does this look like for my people down the line? So we're into land developing. And what I'm gonna do is I can't wait to begin, since I'm introducing social media to the Maroon Society, begin to bring you pictures and videos of things that we're actually out there doing. So this is also part of the Maroon mentality, is that it translates into real physical, tangible things. What are we doing to address the conditions? It's one thing to want freedom. Oh, I want to be free. It's another thing to theorize it, intellectualism. But to be but intellectual maroonage translates into this real action and participation to fight off the yokes of evils.
For food for our people? Are we growing our own food? Are we building our own gardens? Or do we have a reciprocal relationship with Black farmers to be able to support them so that they can provide us with the essential foods that we need? Something to think about. These are questions that Maroons ask. But these aren't just questions that Maroons ask. These are solutions that Maroons put in place. Another thing we have to consider, what about water? Clean, drinkable water. What about education? Who will educate our children? We've seen the destabilization of public schooling, and even prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, our children were not being properly served. And now they've gone a year and a half without face-to-face instruction in many cases. And so we have to make appropriations for education, and we have many Maroon educators in our midst. Here in the Atlanta area, you have Quilombo Pan-African Institute, and Quilombo was a Maroon nation. And so Quilombo School is named after a Maroon nation. Okay. So we have the Quilombo Pan-African Institute. We have Akobin Institute. We have Aya Educational Institute. We've got Pearl Academy.
Let me shout out Pearl Academy. Let me shout out Ross Marvin, president of the UNIA Julius Nyeri Division 112 down here in Atlanta, man. Shouts out, and also an engineering and science teacher at the Pearl Academy. Pearl Academy is doing the work. You know what I'm saying? Pearl Academy is spitting out the children, and their test scores are incredible. but he's going to go into a little bit about what that is about. It's not just about the basic academia they get, but having it explained with a cultural influence, having that slant, having teachers that are culturally expressive and immersed in different cultural expressions. You know what I'm saying? Not just expressive, but different expressions. You know, at the Pearl Academy, you got Muslims, you got the Rastafari, Jamaat Routing, you got the various people who have taken on the Moorish the Moorish the Maroon mentality and come together and understand what it is really about. And so shouts out to Pearl Academy, man. Great school, great school. If you're in Atlanta and you're looking for a place to send your children that is independent of thought, that is culturally enriched, that is for us, by us, caters to us, advances our people, check out the Pearl Academy. I'm definitely a proponent of that school.
We've got Saba Academy online, which my wife founded. Okay. So let me go back and run down that list real quick. Okay. We got Quilombo, which was founded by Sister Aminata Umoja. Okay. We have Aya Educational Institute, founded by Wakesa and Afia Madzamoyo. We have Pearl Academy. We have Akobin Institute, founded by Imwalimu and Mama Ya Baruti. And then we have Saba Academy online, founded by Mama Willette Akua. So we have a lot of options available to us. Are we taking advantage of it? Some of these schools are in person, some of them are online, some of them are in person and online. But we need to take advantage of our education as a people. And at no time in our history have we had access to technology the way that we do now in order to do that. So we have to have this mentality of the Maroons that we're going to take back the education of our children. Here's something else Maroons think of: health. Health. You know, we've seen a lot of brothers and sisters who are taking back their own health and finding the best.
That killed a lot of y'all systems right there. I'm just fucking with you. Health. The Maroons care about their health. I'm good. I'm done. Pew, pew, pew. Shots, man.
Best ways to boost our immune systems in the midst of this pandemic. We need some Maroon health warriors who are going to teach us natural ways of healing. Okay, but not only health, we know a large component of health is mental health, but I'm putting that as a separate bullet point because even prior to COVID-19, we were dealing with intergenerational, multi-generational, unaddressed trauma. I'm going to say that again. Even prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, we were dealing with intergenerational, passed down from generation to generation, multi-generational, many different generations exposed to this, unaddressed trauma. When I say unaddressed trauma, I'm talking about physical mutilation and beating and abuse. Happened every day on the plantation. Sexual abuse of males and females, boys and girls, happening every day on the plantation. And we are 400 years without therapy. So if we're going to be Maroons, we have to take our mental health into account because many of us are in need of counseling to address unaddressed trauma. All right. And then safety and security. How are we going to secure our neighborhoods and our communities? If police brutality is a problem, how do we then learn how to police our own communities to keep them safe and to make them safe once again? These are some of the systems that we have to have in place if we're going to be seeking and striving for sovereignty as the Maroons did. This is part of what it means to have the mentality of the Maroons. So that leads to session 4, our final session on sovereignty. You've heard me use this term several times, but I want to define it for you so that we're very clear what we mean when we say sovereignty. My definition of sovereignty is very simply this: community control with African continental connections. Community control. We control the politics, the education, the economics of our own communities, but we also have African continental connections. And
Damn, that sounds familiar. Damn, that sounds familiar. You know, like I said, take pot shots all anybody wants, but no one can deny that they have never heard me quote those same words. Because those are the words of dear brother Malcolm, who had defied a modern black nationalism, a contemporary black nationalism that every form, new form, or contemporary or evolved form of Pan-Africanism, universal Africanism, international Africa, whatever we're calling them in these terms, have derived from that cornerstone of what Malcolm gave us. And it's no different right here with mental maroonage, with the mental maroon concept. I know people will come out, that ain't what sovereignty is, that ain't what sovereignty. He says, listen, the Maroons are self-determinists. We are self-determinists. We determine the right to defy our own destiny and to defy not just the verbiage, but the understanding of this verbiage as it relates to us. Well, the international world ain't. Then we don't care what the white man says. We know that anything that influences the oppressor or our enemy is going to be tangible. We understand that we can't out-talk them, out-pray them, out-cry them, out-hug them. None of those things. That anything that this devil will understand will be a tangible force. It will be consequences. I mean, not what I'm looking for. Cause and effect type thing. You're not going to do this because if you do this, this will happen to you type shit. Anything else is just fanciful. So it's close to it, close to it. That's why I said the dark side is on it. The dark side is on it. There's some questions. It's like, the acceptability. You know what I'm saying? That's why I say it almost had me. It's just that acceptability and some of the rhetoric, Lex. Some of the rhetoric. You know what I'm saying? But I get it. It's like when you're a Messiah, you reserve that right to use language to bring the people over, but it's just hard. You can't be using these Christian concepts talk about you battling Christianity. But that's a whole nother thing. You and I are going to do something on that. You and I, because I do want to talk about that further. I want to talk about that further. But right now, I want to finish this up so, we can disperse the people. They can check out all the other wonderful shows going on in the YouTube world. But we are going to revisit that. But yeah, back to the self-determinationist part. This is so define this right. This is what that is. This is what that is. Black nationalism or controlling our shit with African continental connections to be able to sustain these communities that we develop. Let me go back real quick because he's wrapping it up.
And those African continental connections serve to help us to understand the culture and to forge relations and alliances with our brothers and sisters on the continent so that we can assist them and they can assist us. Our brothers and sisters on the continent are standing on top of the wealth of the world, the natural resources of gold, diamonds, silver, oil, petroleum, bauxite, all of the different resources needed for us to have the way of life that we do here in America and in the West in general. Those resources come largely out of Africa, as Africa is still being raped and robbed and pillaged for its resources. So sovereignty is community control with African cultural connections. continental connections. Sovereignty suggests African management of its natural resources rather than foreign manipulation of its natural resources. So Maroons controlled their entire area, whether they were going up into the hills and the mountains of Jamaica, or whether they were going into the swamps of North Carolina and South Carolina and Florida and Georgia. They controlled their entire area and they managed the resources of those areas. So sovereignty suggests African management of its natural resources rather than foreign manipulation of its natural resources. And here on this map, you can see all the different places and the different natural resources that Africa has in the area of iron ore, fish, gold, cocoa beans, petroleum, diamonds, copper, platinum, coffee, livestock, natural gas, all of these different things, textiles, phosphates, okay? But most of these resources are under foreign control, manipulation, and domination. The mentality of the Maroons says we will control our own resources and use them in the building of our new reality. So once again, I ask you, what systems do we need to have in place for food, for water, for shelter, for education, for health, for mental health, for safety and security, and any and everything that we would want in our own communities and in our own nations? These are the things that Maroons have to think about. This goes far beyond the quest for equity and deals with sovereignty. Sovereignty is community control plus African continental connections. All right. So with that in mind, I want to point you towards a resource that my family and I have developed in our quest for sovereignty.
Yeah, so that's it. That's the Baru mentality in I don't want to say in a nutshell because it can be a lot more complex. I want to say that that is a great general introduction into the Maroon mentality and what where the Maroon perspective is, and why I wanted to present that is because with the platform, with having Maroon Society, with having this platform, I think it's you may want to know, okay, where is this particular platform coming from? What how are things going to be perceived? What is the perspective? And this is the perspective. Also, the overall general welcoming and inviting nature of the Maroon for those people who want freedom, for those people who want liberation, for those people who want to be expressive, who want to explore their thoughts, who want to hear new thoughts and to share their thoughts and want to do it without it being punitive, without being punished for it. You know, the Maroons, like we did then for those free loving people, we provided protection, we provided a stable place, we provided a stability. We just, the only thing that the Maroons ask in return is your loyalty, your love, and your willingness to defend the idea of freedom. I'm not asking you to defend me. I'm not asking you to defend any concept that I may come up with, but I am asking you uh, to defend uh, freedom, to defend freedom. So, yeah, he says that's Pan Africanism. It all is. I mean, when you look back, there are going to be so many similarities because it is all derived from the same spot where we say maroonage. And that's why I say he was a good general overview because some of the people that he holds to intellectual maroonage, I necessarily don't hold to intellectual maroonage. I think that they're overt cultural nationalists, if not outright agents, Ron Karinga being one of them. You know what I'm saying? I don't know how welcomed I would feel with him in my particular community. So that exists in particular Maroon communities. That's why we have communities. The community that I belong to, the Maroon Society that I belong to, has uh, affiliates or other communities, Maroon communities in Oklahoma and upstate New York. You know, we exchange information. We may go visit one another. It's more than just an exchange of information. We're actually like that's the thing about the maroonage. The maroon, what separates it is, yes, you have Pan Africanists that are maroons. Yes, you have black nationalists that are maroons. Yes, you have this and that because all of those elements are contained in that gumbo. But the difference between being a maroon is that a maroon must be active and to participate in the real fight for independence. And only know if you're active or not. That's why I said, when I told him, hey man, and got the more or less permission to launch a Maroon Society on YouTube, it was, like, well, how's that work on YouTube when a very large basis of what we do is action? How would you measure that? But that's where we trust in the integrity and the moral uprightness of the people to know how much that they're really placing back into the masses, how much activity that they're really putting into our liberation. This is just a great platform to exchange those ideas and prayerfully to motivate and inspire one another to be participatory in their day-to-day affairs. This is very important, brothers and sisters. I can't stress this enough. You must master your day-to-day affairs. You can turn this on and turn these various stations on. Shouts out to the channels too, who do a fantastic job of sometimes of promoting our cause and putting it out there. Allow this to be our plug. Let's plug in. Let's get energized. Let's get charged. But let's get out there and really be active. So this is one of the concepts of maroonage. The other concept of maroonage, like we'll talk about, um, and it will vary from different communities. Some communities, when you talk about the room, put a lot of emphasis on agriculture, a lot of emphasis on land, some on defense, the aspect of defense. I know some Maroons are very big, like he was talking about the Baba that was a black belt, very big in defense. I know Maroons who that is their specialty. What makes it different, what this is what makes the Maroon different again is the all inclusive, where you find in black nationalism and pan Africanism still the tit for tats. Like I'm a black nationalist before the Pan Africanist experience. You know what I'm saying? And I know staunch Pan Africanists before the black nationalist experience. It still leaves us to debate these questions and to go back and forth, which are fine. That's how we come to answers. But Maroon, it says while you're debating these things, while you're discussing these things, what are you really doing though? Like he said, what's the system you have set up? That's what I'm constantly putting the emphasis on Marooners. Don't worry, Lex, ain't nobody, you ain't gotta feel threatened, man. Ain't nobody trying to tell. I'm not the one. I am not the chosen one, brother. I am not the Messiah. I'm not Maroonage. Here's what's the difference is gonna be. And like you discovered, you're a Maroon, brother. It's your Egungun. It's your ancestors. You can call it what you want to call it. You can label it as we evolve, as we uh, start to have more access to information and we become a lot more enlightened or intelligent. We're going to express and say things differently. But when it all goes down to the very core and essential, I believe it's Egungun. It's your ancestors. It's your ancestors. This, what you're doing is ancestral. What we're doing is ancestral, and it's a noble thing, and we should continue to do that thing. But what makes it maroon, what makes it maroonage, you know what I'm saying? Like you have the maroon philosophy and ideology. Dark side expresses that, I think, you know, I don't want to say adequately. See, I ain't trying to blow smoke up your ass. There's still some shit. You know what I'm saying? There's still some shit. But I mean, for the most part, overall, the concept of the dark side is very maroonage. Everything in that is very maroonage. But what makes it full maroon is when that is translating to tangible. When dark side begins to have, and I'm not saying that they don't. I don't know what area they may be in. I'm saying so if they are doing this, then they are a maroon society. They are a maroon community. When it becomes tangible, when it comes out of theory and becomes practical, it is a maroon society and a maroon community. I never just really bring, like I said, my name is Yanga. We'll go back and study the Maroon Enclave or the Maroon encampment or community of Gaspayanga. You know what I'm saying? But I never really put it like Blue said. It can be controversial. Like he said, I mean, the double master teacher. I couldn't have put it more adequately. He's like, yeah, I knew it. I stayed away from it because of the controversy. Absolutely, absolutely. It has the potential to open a can of worms that don't necessarily have to be. The difference between a black nationalist and a Pan Africanist is it depends how deep you want to go, where you want to start. Start from the flag. The black nationalist flag is black, red, and green. So the black nationalist puts the people first. Uh, the Pan Africanist from the red, black, and green says it's the blood of all African people. The black nationalist starts right here. Says it immediately starts right here, and then it expands out. Where the Pan Africanist says it starts with the connection of all of Africa's children throughout the diaspora, which is good. And we have to have that discussion on that, which, is good. But I don't know how you have this overall general sense of connectedness and um, attachment to the children of the diaspora, and while overstepping your brother or sister right here in these very real conditions that we're living in right now. So it's a whole, and then it depends on what degree of Pan-Africanist I'm speaking to. You may not be like, I got Pan-Africanist partners. I'm going to bring them on the show, Zizwe. I got Pan-Africanist partners that are triple, double down Pan-Africanist. Like, the whole nine, been to Africa and the whole nine, that tried the whole experience. And even though I personally believe it didn't work out for them, because some of them have come back, some of them are still over there. I got some repatriationists partners. Shouts out to Richard Shabazz. Shouts out to Asma York and a few repatriationists who have went to Ghana. But I know some who have went other than Ghana, some other places in Africa, and have come back, and they still maintain staunch Pan-Africanism. So shouts out to them. But, shouts out to my teachers, Akil and Prime Minister and Prime Minister Harlel Jones and Omar Ali Bey and all of those. I grew up with staunch black nationalist teachers. So it's just perspective and how deep we want to get in these ideologies and philosophies, which I'm sure would be a great show. I'm sure would be a great show. He said, "Keep shaking my head." I don't be wanting to do it to him. I don't be wanting to do it to you, Les, because I know you like a lot of people's hero. So I don't be wanting to do it to you, nephew. Not really. What you do would be real cute. Sometimes, and not even real cute. Some of it's beyond cute. Some of it is like point on, spot on. But a lot of it leaves some shit to be desired, and that's what I'm telling you. Keep growing and learning. I think that one of the things yeah, I'm gonna leave that advice because you're the chosen one. I'm sure God instructs you, so God will teach you. I'm sure God is your guide. So anything I say would just be mere man folly. So I won't waste your divine ears time with my man-made wisdoms. But keep growing, keep studying, especially when you want to start getting this ideology in the theology and things of that nature. I think that you are very proficient. But when you come to this ideology, man, you might want to send Inyame or Blue or Kofi them. You might want to tread lightly on these discussions, dear brother. Listen, with that, man, I'm gonna let y'all go, man. Shouts out to Lex, man. Shouts out to the dark side. I love having a brother over. I love the antagonism, man. Keep it coming. You guys keep come checking me out, man. Now you got a home of free black thought. You got a place to come hang out and share with me. Please feel free to do, man. Look for the subscribe, share, like, look for the notifications. You know what I'm saying? And we're gonna be coming back with some more hot shit. And to them, man, disperse throughout the YouTube lands, man. Find your favorite YouTuber, sit back, relax, and enjoy their show. WUKUSU. Wake up, clean up, and stand up.